Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series. I'm Max Scoville, filling in for Daemon Hatfield, and this week I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Good to see you, sir.
Likewise. And Miranda Sanchez, executive editor of IGN Guides team and a regular on Unlocked.
It's true. Hello.
Hey. And joining us all the way from Finland, Thomas Puha, communications director for Remedy, the studio behind one of this year's most anticipated games, Alan Wake 2. Welcome, Thomas. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here in such esteemed company. I love it.
Now, Ryan, do you want to kick us off? We have a lot of burning questions here. And Thomas, you have, I'm hoping, lots to say.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas is, we've known Thomas a long time at IGN. We just got done with an IGN first exclusive month of coverage on Alan Wake. Control was IGN's Game of the Year in 2019. So we've always loved Remedy, and we are super jazzed for Alan Wake 2. So we wanted to invite Thomas to come on, especially in light of the fact that this game is super next-gen. I talked about it in my final preview that went up on IGN pretty recently. It is one of the most next-gen looking next-gen games that we've seen so far. And I mean, visually I was floored by it. Gameplay-wise, I'm loving it, and I can't wait to play more. But Thomas, you know, your timing to appear here today is great because Remedy just announced something that next-gen gamers are really going to be happy about, which is a performance mode option will be there on day one for Alan Wake 2 on the PS5 and Xbox Series X. Understandable that it will not be on the Series S. So I'm curious, how important was it for the team to get that done for launch when we've seen a lot of new-gen games add this as a post-release update? Also, I'm curious if the kind of recent discourse, for lack of a better term, in the gaming community about, oh, is 30 frames okay? Do we accept that on these new consoles? I'm curious if that sort of conversation in the community affected the team's decision to really put the pedal to the metal to get this performance mode done.
So we can go back a couple of years. So after PS5 and Series S and X launched, you had all these games that were kind of previous gen that were brought onto next gen, including Control, and everybody was doing 60 FPS or variable refresh rate, 40 FPS, that sort of thing. And we had a pretty big meeting at Remedy with the key creatives on Alan Wake 2, and like me and a couple of other stakeholders and even management, because like the discussion was that the team felt that they want to make like a predominantly 30 FPS game, and that's because the visuals, visual effects and all of that is so important to them, and everything's always a compromise. And then several of us were kind of in the camp like, well, there's expectation now on this next generation that like people want more options, and we should be giving them a 60 FPS option, especially as this was after like the next gen console launch, and we saw a lot of that. But then knowing like all of the sort of engine changes we're doing and the sort of it's still the same sort of same core team that was on Control, so we're going to push like the graphics really hard and do state-of-the-art effects and everything. And the team was looking at the sort of hardware specs, and everything was like feeling like, okay, if we want to do kind of upscaled 4K with all the visuals and the environments we want to be doing, then 30 FPS would be the sort of the choice, because 60 FPS is a pretty big compromise. One of the lessons we learned on Control was that we got to the console versions very late, and that resulted in that when we launched Control on the previous gen, the performance wasn't great at launch. I mean, we fixed it in a couple of weeks, really. We're pretty PC developer at heart, so we just got to the consoles late, which was a mistake, but limited resource and all that. But anyway, so for Alan Wake 2, we really focused on like whenever we shipped like a milestone, whether it's like every 8 weeks or something, that the game would run on all the platforms. So Series X and S, PS5 and PC. So we really worked hard to maintain parity on Wake 2. So you could pretty much play the game. I mean, didn't ran poorly, but you could still play it on console, and permanently we would play it during development on PC. But we took a lot more care. We had so much more new tech as well that really helps. I mean, we redid our entire sort of rendering pipeline, redid the occlusion calling system, just a bunch of stuff. I mean, this is Remedy. We've always got to be doing this stuff. That was better, that we could run the game on consoles throughout production. But it was in the back of our minds, like, can we do 60? And really, the other word, like the word that gets thrown around a lot these days is optimize. And people tend to use the word optimize as something like, oh, we'll just optimize in the last couple of months and then we can just magically make the game work. And those days are kind of gone. Like if you make an online, like the decision isn't like when you start making a game, like the first discussion isn't about the frame rate. It's about what kind of game you're going to make. And then later down the line, it's like, okay, like what kind of gameplay will it have? Is it fast paced and all that, which means you probably want like a higher frame rate. So anyway, we kept the performance mode kind of there in the background. And even though I say that we can't optimize in the last couple of months, I would say we really started back in May, really to work on Series S like heavily. Got back on the memory use, and that was super painful. But all of that work does help us to kind of get to like a good performance mode, which mostly runs at 60, especially in the dark place, because that's just a lot easier. So in the end, we were able to pull it off, but really the main work has been that like it's gotta be rock solid 30. Like that's been what we test. That's what QA everybody testing, that it's gotta be like a super solid 30. And like I'm a big performance mode guy, but like I mostly actually played Wake at 30 because it's just like so smooth and the visuals just do look incredible. But then I do also like a performance mode, and I'm glad it's in there. But it's been a pretty incredible effort, not just from the engineers, but like it's just not about code. A lot of it is just about the amount of visual content. And if we look at Alan Wake 2 and we look at like the dark place where Wake is most of the time is relatively easy. It's kind of urban environment, like the draw distance, everything. It's just a lot more manageable from a performance standpoint. Then you go to the Saga side in the Pacific Northwest, where we just really have to make life hard for ourselves. You know, we have huge amount of trees, we have huge amount of foliage, we have super good lighting, and we do it in like a very expensive way so that it looks really nice. And all of those things are just super expensive to do and to render, because transparency is, you know, the leaves and the bushes and all that. So but we've done a lot of work on those as well in the last couple of months to get it running well. And it was a good milestone when we showed the game back in June at Playdays, and we had it on PS5, and it ran really well. And if you run well on PS5, then Series X is not really gonna be a problem. That was a very long answer. Now I forgot what.
It's all right. You answered it. You answered it.
No, yeah,
Miranda?
absolutely. Kind of getting into a little bit more of what you're already talking about. So speaking of console performance specifically, what do you feel are the trade-offs for quality mode and performance mode? I mean, we get the lists, we know what we see there, but as a developer and as the person who's obviously been playing a lot of this, what do you feel is the difference there?
Well, obviously the main difference is you got to drop the resolution. And when I tweeted about this, I didn't tweet the resolution because people look at the numbers and then they're like, oh, that's bad. I'm like, you should look at the image quality of this game ultimately. And that's really good. So that's one thing, but that's not really that's not the thing that just like magically makes it run somewhere close to 60. Like we're actually, like CPU side, we're doing okay. But it's a lot of tricks. I mean, our engine has a bunch of settings, and really it's about tweaking those settings, like texture detail, shadow detail, quality of the lighting, all of these things. And you're trying to maintain a really good visual quality while you're trying to attain that frame rate. So there's always going to be trade-off, but really it's like, you know, if I talk to our director, he's like, like performance mode, the visual quality drops. I'm like, it really doesn't, like, not to my eyes. It still looks absolutely incredible. But the artists, of course, have a slightly different view. But at the end of the day, it's like a choice for the players. Like it's you're not gonna, either you get all of the effects and the graphics, or you get a better frame rate. I would just try to make sure that you can get the best of both worlds. But I'm really curious when the game ships, like what people will think. Even though I think this discourse about resolutions and frame rates and everything is getting a bit out of hand. But hey, here I am talking about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, on that note, Thomas, I'm kind of curious if, from a developer's perspective, do you think it is or was reasonable for gamers to expect 4K 60 FPS on these consoles? Because I would argue, I think that's what both Sony and Microsoft sold us with on these consoles, that was going to be a pretty normal thing. And we're seeing that, the deeper we get into the generation, as you mentioned, kind of the early gen were a lot of kind of port ups like Control and other things, adding some technical details to previous gen games. But now that we're seeing proper new generation games like Alan Wake 2, it's not always 4K 60. So what is it reasonable for gamers to expect 4K 60 this generation, or is that something we should be kind of reevaluating and kind of being a little more open-minded to?
It's a difficult one because, like I said, it's not like you're never going to have hardware where you can do everything. Well, you can get an insanely expensive PC and that kind of gets you close. But that's a very small percentage that has that. So it's not like it's the game that when we start making a game, like it's not about this stuff. It's about like what kind of game are we making? What's the tone, the story, the characters, and then we start like we all talk about, it would be nice if this is 60 because it just like feels better. But then you want to be doing all of these effects, all of these visuals, and everything else, and it's always going to be a compromise. So really, it's down to like developers. Like, what do you focus on? Like, if you make Call of Duty, like, the number one thing on the board is like it's got to be 60 because like it's a multiplayer game. Like that's what those folks do, and we just have different priorities, and that's really it. And like I said, like we started Alan Wake, we're developing the game where it's like, okay, like we're really gonna make the graphics and visual effects and audio, everything it's a slow-paced game, so that's fine, and then we're gonna see if we can get like a performance mode in. So it's not about, like there's a lot of like, oh, the devs are lazy, they don't do it. Like, no, it's a choice. We cannot do everything. You just can't. Like, we don't have infinite resources, especially at Remedy. We don't have infinite money to do all of these things, and you're gonna have to choose what you're gonna want to do. Like, do you want us to make the game on the weakest platform, or do you want us to make a game that takes full advantage of the most powerful platforms? Like, imagine you have a studio where everybody wants to do their best. It's very easy to see like what we would choose.
Yeah. So on that note, speaking of infinite money, something that most people don't have, I imagine, the Series S, it has its pluses and minuses. One huge plus being that it's a great point of entry for people to this generation. To Remedy as a studio, would you say that it is a net positive as a device out there?
Choosing my words carefully here. We like Xbox, we like Sony. It's on Series S, like the CPU is pretty much the same as on Series X. There's not a massive difference, but the GPU is an issue. It really is. And then having less memory is a pretty big problem. And we often get, hey, you make PC games, surely you know how to scale. Well, memory is not a problem on PC. It really isn't. And that's one of the struggles when you talk about resolution and frame rate. It's just not enough to like drop the resolution heavily. I mean, that's what we're doing on the S, and really, really working hard to make sure that the visual quality still holds up. And it's just strange that we can't kind of people accept that on a weaker PC, you're just going to have less, the visuals are not going to be as good and your frame rate's not going to be as good and it's accepted. There's a massive difference on like Series S and Series X GPU. And sure, people can mention that this game did this so well and all that. And every game is different, every developer is different, but you can't have sort of the best of both worlds, and you got to choose where you're going to focus. And I think if the Series S is like, I don't know, $250 or whatnot, and X and PS5 are like $500-600, then obviously there's a massive difference in the power you are getting.
Right.
So it's just a lot easier to scale on the PC because of memory, and it's not like there's one super PC and one weaker PC. There's like 300 PC configurations in between, and trust me, that's a massive struggle. But we shipped a lot on PC, so we're a bit better about that. But we've really worked hard on getting S to run at a solid 30 and trying to maintain like a good visual quality. But like if you want to see the game at its best in full next-gen glory, then it's going to be on the machines that have the hardware grunt to enable that.
Mid-gen upgrades, Thomas, if these Xbox leaks are to be believed, and we know that they're not necessarily the most current things, then Microsoft looks like they might not be doing a mid-gen upgrade this generation. We don't really know if Sony's doing one, but last generation we got one for both the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X. And Control definitely took advantage of both of those machines. And so I'm curious, if one were to do a mid-gen upgrade this generation and the other weren't, does that just make a developer's life, a top-tier developer like Remedy, does that make your life hell? Or because of the sort of scalability and your PC background, I know that's not the just snap your fingers problem-solving solution, but is that more of a manageable thing because you're already supporting a wide range of PCs, the Series S, the Series X, the PS5? So would a mid-gen upgrade, if it happens for either manufacturer this generation, would that complicate life for Remedy, or would that be a good thing?
Well, I know really honestly nothing about any of the upcoming potential like hardware, so I've read the same things, but if there's like a slightly more upgraded machine, like a mid-gen upgrade or whatever you wanna call it, then it's still easier to kind of scale up because you're not scaling down, but like the expectation just is like, oh, it'll be a bit better. So we could tweak some settings, like I don't know, like higher sort of maybe texture quality or shadows and things like that, so it doesn't seem massively complicated. But sure, it's like yet another thing to worry about. So that perspective, it doesn't make it easier. But then I think most consumers like expect like the base experience, but slightly better, and that seems more feasible. I would personally think, considering like with the pandemic and all the supply chain issues and stuff like that like both platform holders would be pretty set on just selling what they have now.
Yeah.
I don't know, but like it just seems to me that would be the thing like to do.
Now, having a platform that has more power, more better hardware is like a good problem to have from a development standpoint, I imagine. But on the flip side of things, Remedy did a cloud version of Control, or Control came to Switch via cloud, and then there was the Alan Wake remastered, which was understandably a little bit scaled down compared to the other versions. We're hearing rumblings of a Switch successor, a Super Switch, a Switch 2. What would Nintendo need to put in there, kind of hardware specs-wise, to make it a platform that Remedy was really focused on?
Oh, you're giving me questions. It's so hard to answer that they don't like sound somehow bad. Again, know nothing about any potential Switch 2 or anything like that. I think on Nintendo side, the thing's always been like they don't compete, I think, with Sony or Microsoft, in the sense like if you have a PS5 or Series X, like you're probably also going to have like a Switch if you're into games, which I think is such a great thing for Nintendo. Like it's Switch has very unique games, but from like a like surely you've noticed over the years like that it's difficult to have really successful third-party games on Nintendo's platforms, because I think, at least me as a consumer, I get a Nintendo platform for Nintendo's games and maybe some of Platinum's games, where really it's like for Zelda and Mario Kart, and there's another F-Zero now, but like you get it for those. So like even when Alan Wake Remaster was brought on Switch, and that was definitely some harsh lessons learned there, like how we should have approached it. But that was like, okay, like would be nice to kind of widen the audience of the game, and Nintendo wanted the game, so that's the big part of it, that Epic also wanted to be on the platform. But really the question is like, where is your demographic ultimately? And if you have hardware such as the current Switch, which is already getting pretty old, like you got to make another game for that. You can't just really. I haven't played Mortal Kombat on it, but I've read. I feel for NetherRealm, and like it's just like you can't really make like the same experience that you have on like a PS5 Pro. Probably shouldn't even try, because I don't think any amount of optimization will like save you there. Like you almost got to make like a different game, and Nintendo's kind of always done their own thing, right? So now I'm curious too. Now I'm like, I don't even have like an OLED Switch. I have the old Switch. I'm like, should I get like the OLED Switch, or is there going to be a Switch 2 in like, I don't know, six months or whatever? So we'll see. I'm really curious. Like, is it going to be? Well, yeah, I'm curious to see what Nintendo will do. But the main Nintendo thing to focus on is the new Super Mario game on Switch. That's the thing. That's what I want. That's what I want to be playing.
You and me both.
So, Thomas, thank you so much for joining us. This has been awesome. Before we go, last week we asked our viewers how much money they would pay for a AAA quality console game on their phone. And unsurprisingly, a lot of people said that they would pay less money. I think 69% said the nice price was $20. And as you might expect, you know, the higher the price, the less votes it had. But weirdly enough, the more people said they would pay $60 than 50. I think it was like 4% said they would pay, you know, $60, and then 2% said 50. So that's just like apparently a no-go zone there. This week it is a matter of opinion more than budget. What is your favorite Remedy game? Max Payne, Max Payne 2, Alan Wake, Quantum Break, Control, or the campaign for Crossfire X? Head over to IGN.com and cast your vote.
Do we make Thomas vote on the air?
Thomas, what's the best Remedy game?
What's your favorite, Remedy?
What's your favorite?
The one you haven't listed, so Alan Wake 2.
Yeah, we haven't played that in full yet, so we didn't include it on the poll.
That'll do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Ryan, Miranda, thank you so much for hanging out and chatting. And Thomas, thank you for staying up past your bedtime in the middle of making a very cool Next Gen video game. It's really cool to hear your insight on what that process is like. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern with more PS5 and Xbox Series news. We'll see you then.